So our Chelsea Flower Show garden, the Tyndall Centre 2050 garden as we called it, it was based on a small cottage garden, and we showed effectively a journey from the 1950s to the 2050s, so a 100-year spread of what gardening might look like in the UK. And we started our garden, the entrance to it was a typical 1950s garden with all the sort of plants that we have in our gardens today and that were very prevalent in the 50s, so delphiniums, azaleas, hostas, and lots of sort of fruiting trees and things as well. And these plants are actually going to be very threatened by future climate change. They're not as tolerant, they're much more sensitive to increasing temperature and more variable rainfall. And so what we wanted to show was what might the future for UK gardens look like. So we then had two different areas in the garden that were exploring, that explored this. We had a low emissions area and a high emissions area, and these two areas really showed the sorts of plants we could expect to see in our gardens depending on different futures. So the low emissions garden, for example, that showed plants that we might expect to be able to grow if we thought about cutting our emissions now, which would mean less of an increase in temperature in the future, and possibly we're still going to see a change because we're locked into some sort of change, but possibly not as big a change as if we carry emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and we're going to see more of an increase in temperature, and that's going to have an impact on the sorts of plants and gardening practices that we might have to have in our garden. So that's what we showed in the high emissions garden. And in our garden we also, aside from different plants, we also had information for people about different changes, so variable rainfall, more flooding perhaps, and how we could change our gardening practices, maybe moving from using concrete paving stones to more permeable and recycled materials for garden paths, thinking about increasing pests. Obviously pests are a real problem for gardeners now, but in the future with warmer temperatures we're going to see more pests, different pests from the continent, and that's going to be a problem for gardens and gardeners. So really we wanted to show a real mixture of different opportunities, new plants we might be able to grow, and obviously plants that won't do so well, and problems and opportunities.